The claim by some analysts that Iran holds some critical cards owing to which US is heading towards a strategic defeat reflects a realist view of power, not a simple prediction that Iran will win in a conventional military sense. To evaluate whether the United States is heading towards a strategic defeat because of those advantages, we need to unpack what cards mean and what strategic defeat means for a superpower like US. What analysts mean by Iran holds powerful cards. The argument is rooted in offensive realism, where outcomes are shaped less by battlefield wins and more by cost imposition, geography, and escalation control. Several key points define their position. Escalation dominance through asymmetry. Iran does not need to defeat the US militarily, it only needs to raise the cost of war to unacceptable levels. When conflict escalated, Iran has struck US bases across the region, targeted Israel with missiles and drones, activated regional proxies, disrupted global trade routes. This creates a scenario where every US move invites a wider, costlier response, making escalation inherently dangerous. Second, the Strait of Hormuz as a strategic weapon. The single most important card is geography, specifically control over the Strait of Hormuz. Recent reporting indicates that disruption in the state has already halted a massive share of tanker traffic, removed millions of barrels of oil from global supply, triggered economic instability worldwide. This is critical. Iran can damage the global economy without defeating the US militarily. That is a classic asymmetric leverage. Three, nuclear US military endgame. The strategists emphasize that the US lacks a workable strategy for decisive victory. Limited strikes risk uncontrollable escalation. Full scale war would be enormously costly and prolonged. This creates a paradox. The US can start a war easily but cannot end it on favorable terms. Time is on Iran's side. In wars of attrition, Iran is higher tolerance for pain. The US faces domestic political pressure. Global economic fallout hurts US allies. As the conflict drags on, strategic momentum is shifting towards Iran, even if tactically it suffers damage. Supporting evidence from current developments. Recent events lend support to this argument. Conflict has already lasted longer and cost more than expected. US objectives like forcing Iranian concessions remain unmet. Iran continues to act with strategic confidence. Some analysts now argue that the US position has worsened rather than improved since the conflict began. Additionally, Iran has rejected US peace proposals outright. It has set its own conditions for negotiations. It frames the conflict as a US failure. This suggests Iran is not behaving like a defeated actor. The broader geopolitical argument. The analyst's deeper claim is about system level consequences. Strategic overreach. The US is simultaneously engaged in Europe, that is Ukraine conflict dynamics, Middle East, uh, that is Iran, Asia, that is China competition. A prolonged war with Iran ties down naval and air assets, weakens the US pivot to Asia, benefits rivals like China. This is classical imperial overreach logic. Formation of a counter coalition. US policy is pushing Iran, Russia, and China closer together. This is strategically dangerous because it undermines US global dominance, creates a balancing block, shifts the international system toward multipolarity. Now we come to the claim that Iran holds critical cards. There are three areas where this analysis is particularly convincing. First, economic warfare favors Iran. Iran can disrupt oil flows, spike global prices, hurt US allies more than itself. This is a global leverage, not a battlefield one. Defenses geography. Iran is extremely hard to conquer. Large territory, mountainous terrain, dispersed infrastructure. This makes regime change or decisive victory highly unlikely. Third, political constraints on the US. The US faces war fatigue, economic sensitivity, that is, oil prices, inflation, electoral pressure. Iran, by contrast, is structured for long term resistance. What strategic defeat actually means? This is the most important clarification. The analysts do not mean US military collapse in Iranian conquest. They mean something subtle. A strategic defeat would look like failure to achieve political objectives, long term regional instability, strengthening of adversaries, weakening of US global position. By that definition, a war can be lost even if the US wins battles. Iran suffers heavy damage. A balanced conclusion would be Iran holds some critical asymmetric cards. The US still dominates militarily, but it lacks a clear path to decisive victory. It is vulnerable to economic and geopolitical blowback. It risks being drawn into a long, costly conflict. So, the most likely outcome is a messy, prolonged conflict where the US fails to achieve its goals. And in strategic terms, that indeed amounts to defeat. Final take. Here is the key insight. In modern geopolitics, the side that can impose costs and deny victory often has the real advantage. Iran's strength lies not in defeating the US, but in making victory too expensive, too risky, and ultimately unattainable. That means Iran is in a stronger position overall because the structure of the conflict favors stalemate. And stalemate is often indistinguishable from strategic defeat for a superpower. Thank you very much for supporting this independent source of information and analysis. Please subscribe if you have not done so.